Views expressed by CamaPlan podcast guests may not reflect those of CamaPlan. CamaPlan does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by guests, nor does it endorse or recommend any individual or organization. CamaPlan is not an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. You are encouraged to conduct your own due diligence before making investment choices. For any tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other questions, please consult a specialist. Hi, I'm Michael Duncan, and welcome back to The Road to Financial Freedom. This podcast is brought to you by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator focused on educating investors on how to grow retirement savings faster through alternative investments. In each episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at the many roads taken to financial freedom and how they differ for each of our guests. Our goal is to help the listeners learn how they can achieve their own financial freedom through the experience and stories of experts that have done just that. Today's guest is a general partner in 2,000 multifamily units worth over $200 million as the managing member of Bronson Equity. He's the author of How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage, is a regular contributor to YouTube and his blog, and is also the host of the Mailbox Money Show. I'm very excited to welcome Bronson Hill to the show today. Bronson, how are you doing?
Doing well, man. Excited to talk real estate and talk financial freedom and anything else you want to talk about.
As I was kind of doing research and preparing for this, some really interesting things came up as well from the general information that you gave me. And I do have there are some things I'm very excited to ask you, but I just want to start out first by just kind of asking for your story. You know, how did you get to this point? Where did you start from? And, you know, why is this something that you're passionate about?
Yeah. So for me, my background is medical device sales. I was a well-paid, sales professional, and a lot of people that are, paid well and, have a good job or a good business where they make money can relate where, even if you're not necessarily punching the clock, there's still a time for money trade. And I worked with a couple of physicians that were making over a couple $1 million each a year. And yet they were working 60 or 80 hours a week. And I just thought to myself, that doesn't really feel like financial freedom. And financial freedom really involves time freedom. And so, I think as I learned more about real estate, I always wanted to be a real estate investor, but I had a small single family portfolio that I had developed, but I wanted to be able to scale faster because for me, single family just really was not getting me the cash flow that I wanted. It wasn't really allowing me to be financially free. And then I had a meeting with a cousin that I just hadn't seen in years, and he was a multifamily guy. And I told him I planned to get 30 houses. And he said, well, that sounds like a lot of work. Why don't you do multifamily? So I started looking into it, and he said, basically I said, I don't have the money to do this. And he said, well, you can raise the money. So I learned about something called syndication, which is basically just raising money for larger deals in real estate. A lot of us think we have to start with single family, but I wish I had started sooner. But, I was able to basically scale up, start raising money for real estate, started to meet up in the Los Angeles area where I lived, found an investor, and then over the next couple of years, found some partners and raised about $15 million to do different multifamily deals. And now it's been about 4 years. We've raised about $30 million. We've done some alternative assets, outside of real estate, some stuff in the ATM machine space, as well as a group of car washes that we're scaling up as well. So it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
So that's interesting. That brings me to kind of one of the first things I want to talk about. And we'll get back to multifamily versus single family and all that kind of stuff. But how did you get into the ATM machine? I don't know, business?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's something I didn't really plan to kind of go down that road. What happens sometimes with investing is you'll hear about ideas, and initially they can kind of sound a little crazy. You're like, it's crazy. I never invested in ATMs. I just kind of thought like, if they were a scam, it'd be like in the ATM space or something like that. I just thought it sounded so weird. But I have a couple of friends that I know that I trust implicitly that have been doing this for 10 years or 5-10 years in that space. And I was like, well, let me check it out. So I started looking into it. I decided to invest as an investor, as a passive investor, because I passively invest in different projects as well. And basically found I really liked it. It was the most consistent cash flow deal. I mean, it's just really high returns, and it was paying out monthly. And so I loved it. So after about a year of doing it, I basically approached one of the partners on it and said, hey, well, what if I, worked with this and basically, brought it to my investors. I did a bunch of diligence, background check everybody in the group, got a list of random ATMs in Pennsylvania, just making sure that they actually were labeled correctly. They did belong to the sponsor. and they did. And so everything checked out. And so now we've raised a lot of money for different ATM deals, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
So for anyone that doesn't, I guess, even I know that this exists or know where the money goes, how does that process work? Like when you are getting investors and you're putting money into this ATM machine, what exactly are you buying and how are you making your money back?
Yeah. So how it works is we're partnered with the fifth largest operator of ATM machines in the country. So there's 50,000 ATMs over 6 different states. And basically how it works is the ATM business, a lot of people think, especially investors are like, man, I haven't used an ATM and paid a fee in 10 years or something like that, which is true. But there is a segment of the population, it's about 5 to 10% of the US population that uses ATM machines all the time and pays fees. And why would they do that? Well, it's because they call them the unbanked or the underbanked. It's typically immigrants, it's people on government benefits, which now actually come on debit cards. And so, it's basically a group of people that are, a $2 fee or $3 fee on taking out $60 is just kind of par for the course of what they do. So, so that's kind of how the business works. We'll typically have an establishment. This is kind of how the fund works, is that we'll have, let's say it's a restaurant that has an ATM machine and they're under contract with our group, and they've been with us for 6-7 years. So we'll come to them and say, hey, you've had this ATM machine here. There's typically a split, so they're getting 40 or 50% of the fees that come in, and we're our group is the one that's kind of running it, or the operating group. So basically, we'll go and say, hey, we feel like it's going well. Would you like to have a new ATM machine? They'll say, sure. Say, we'll get you a brand new one and everything. We just need to sign another contract for another 7 years. So when they agree to do it, basically it's a pretty easy sell. We're just basically extending the contract for 7 years. And so that's how we know that the cash flow or the cash stream is secure. When people invest, they don't invest in 5 ATMs or something. It's diversified over, a few thousand ATMs, and the investors get paid. It's a preferred return and they get paid first. And so, this operator that we work with, they haven't missed a payment or reduced a single monthly payment, it's a very high return in over 10 years of doing it. So it's not considered guaranteed, but again, the operator's track record is very solid. So again, I just haven't seen anything that's been as consistent monthly cash flow that's so high. So it's really an interesting investment.
When comparing it to multifamily homes and multifamily units, is this something that is more entry level than something like that? In my mind, buying an ATM versus buying a multifamily property, obviously it's not that simple, but it seems like it would be cheaper. Is this an easier entry level type option for investors?
So it's about, the minimums are typically similar. It is sometimes you can get a slightly lower minimum with the ATM machine. I would say for a lot of people, I'm actually writing a book right now about passive investing, and a lot of people, multifamily is just really easy to understand. People understand apartments, they understand how it works. ATMs, some people that's their first investment. A lot of people have had some experience investing in other passive deals, whether it's multifamily, self-storage, mobile home parks. And they're like, let's find something else. And one of the challenges, especially right now, recording this January of 23, is cash flow in multifamily deals it can be a little inconsistent. We've had some deals that pay out really well, and then because of the rising interest rates, that eats into the cash a little bit, just because of the cost of the interest rate cap, which is like an insurance in case the rates rise, which they have. So the cash flow can be a little bit up and down. I mean, the returns are still great long term. It's just that it's not as consistent. This one, it pays out well. It pays out consistently monthly, and for the way it's projected, a lot of investors receive half their money back in just over 2 years, and in just over 4 years are projected to receive all their money back. And the last 3 years are just cash flow. So it's a very unique investment, and it's something that I love the way it works, and I've become a huge fan.
Yeah, when I first received your information, I was starting to prepare. I saw that and I was really intrigued. It reminded me initially of I don't know if this is something you can relate to, but videos I saw online, maybe 5 years ago, of guys that'll buy a soda machine or something. And then they'll buy 10 of them and they go around and collect all the money. Obviously very different in the way that ATMs and soda machines work, but mentally that's what went through my mind. I was like, I was excited to talk to you about that and learn a little bit more about
it's a lot of people. Yeah. They think, and this comes up a lot, I think, for investors. First of all, who uses ATMs? Yeah. And it's interesting, as digital as we're becoming and things are going, credit cards and PayPal and Apple Pay and all this stuff, there's just more and more cash transactions being done as well. I think the number is like they've either doubled or tripled in the last 20 years as far as the number of ATM transactions. So it's just interesting. We have these kind of diverging trends, right? So the biggest risk I see is just that, will cash go away? And of course, that conversation has been around since credit cards have been around, but we're still seeing a lot of people use this, and I don't think there's the political will to do away with cash. And I think if they try to do it, a lot of people would say, well, this is going to hurt immigrants, or it's going to hurt people that, or even people politically on the other side would say it's a privacy issue. The government shouldn't have to be in all your business. And that's what central bank digital currency or more digital transactions would do.
Yeah, I think all that makes a lot of sense. It is interesting, though, those diverging just pathways in terms of how that's all going. So something else that kind of goes along with that is, and we'll go along a little bit with the multifamily units, is how can you get started in real estate if you don't want to be a landlord? Which I'm assuming there was a big difference. I mean, you said there was between the single family and the multifamily. And so what is that that next step in not wanting to be a landlord, really passive income?
Yeah. So a lot of people that I talk with, I've had over 1,300 one-on-one phone calls with high net worth investors, and it's just a lot of people have a rental house or they've got a couple. And I always tell them, if you can't, first of all, you look at how much cash flow you're receiving. And these days it's hard to find anything that cash flows. If you're buying houses, maybe it's just slightly, if you're getting $100 a month or $200 a month, and it's important that you include all of your expenses, including a property manager or what your time is worth. A lot of times we actually undervalue our time. So if and even though I had 4 or 5 single family houses at one point, I was getting calls and emails every week. What do we do in this situation? This tenant's not paying. We're having this issue of repairs. And it never worked out the way that I was hoping. I wasn't always buying in the best areas, but a lot of times I tell investors, if you can't 10x the investment that you're doing. So if you have 2 rental houses, if you couldn't go to 20, and a lot of people their eyes just about, bug out of their head when I say that, but then it's not really a passive investing strategy. And one of the issues for high earners, if somebody has a net worth or, a high net worth of over, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, whatever it is, or they make a lot of money in their job, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars or over $1 million a year, their time is very valuable. And so to try to scale up, how are you going to take the time to go acquire those? People say, oh, I enjoy it, or I do this. But when you get to a point, or if you get to 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 houses, it's like, or units, it just gets to be really hard to manage. That's really the case for actual passive investing. Now, there is a saying, Michael, that, there's no such thing as passive investing, really, because no one cares about your investment the way you do, which I think is true. But I also think, there are investments that are more passive, right? As a passive investor, your work is on the front end where you're vetting a team and you're vetting a deal. And if you choose to, then you can invest, and you can be able to get into deals where it is mailbox money. And that's the name of my podcast, is the Mailbox Money Show. And we talk about, issues like this of how do we, reduce taxes, how do we grow our wealth without taking up more of our time. And so if somebody is a business owner or if they're a professional, learning about passive investing, I mean, it's the whole Warren Buffett quote, right? Unless you learn to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. That's one of my favorite quotes, because it really gets you thinking, man, how am I making money when I sleep? Or what happens if I'm not in the equation? If I can't manage these things, how's this going to work? And, passive income, especially in syndicated deals, that's really how it works.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think Warren Buffett absolutely had it right. I mean, obviously something that we're really familiar with over here at CamaPlan is, we're a self-directed IRA administrator. So it's all about passive investments and just trying to make money for your retirement in creative alternative investment strategies, and doing this kind of stuff just with your retirement money, which a lot of people don't even realize that you can do. And I think that kind of goes along with my next question, which is something that it seems like you're passionate about, is it really possible to legally pay zero taxes? Obviously, I know self-directed IRAs are a big part of that, is not paying taxes or paying minimal taxes. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, that's something I'm really passionate about. We're actually getting ready in the fall to start an event called the Zero Tax Investing Summit. And basically, trying to find a way. We're going to have a bunch of CPAs and different people, professionals, business owners there, and just share case studies of how people have reduced their taxes. I know a couple brothers that live in California that sold a medical practice for $5 million, and their tax bill was $2.4 million. and they were able to reduce their tax to 125,000, right? Through some just different creative incentives the government puts in place. People can call these loopholes, but the challenging thing is that, if it's somebody else gets the tax break, it's a loophole. If it's if it's you, then it's an incentive, right? Or it's a positive, right? It's a tax reform. So, but no, I think it's really important to find, there are areas in investing such as real estate, providing housing for people. The government, incentivizes because they want to have affordable housing, right? Or in the energy space, the oil and gas space, the solar space. There's other spaces that you can invest in that actually provide tax credits, right? And so I'm not a CPA or I'm not an attorney giving, anybody giving advice personally, but we've watched people that have been able to, legally reduce their taxes. I was actually able to reduce my tax rate to, I was, making over 200K a year with a great job, and I was paying typically 40, 50K a year in taxes. And I was able to reduce that to about a 1% total tax rate, right? And how I did that was just through my real estate investments. There's something called the real estate professional designation that either someone or their spouse can become a real estate professional. And then they, through depreciation, using a lot of depreciation that you get through these real estate deals, you're able to reduce your taxable basis. So it's a really kind of cool thing that exists that a lot of people just kind of write off like, that just doesn't make any sense. I don't know. But in reality, it's very real and people are doing it, and it's a huge benefit.
I mean, I think it's tough just, from my point of view, it's hard enough to understand taxes to begin with. Like, it's hard enough to understand, where taxes are being taken out of and why and all this kind of stuff. Like, filing taxes is you have to pay someone, they hope they get it right or whatever. And then on top of that, all of these quote unquote loopholes, like it adds an extra layer of complexity to something that is already complex enough that the majority of people don't care to understand on their own. So I agree that they're not really loopholes because they're things that are put in place on purpose as an incentive to make certain choices, with the benefit being getting a tax break or whatever. Like, a loophole has a very certain connotation of something that's not supposed to be there, or when it's discovered, it's something that's going to be taken away or taken out of the fine print or whatever. And I think I agree with you. This is not, for the most part, they're not loopholes. They're things that are put in place purposely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that, people don't realize. I mean, the tax code is, I think it's like 7,000 pages or something. And there's a lot of stuff in there that is really, it's to help you to try to reduce your taxable basis, I think. I mean, I think that's the reason they put this stuff in here, is so that there are certain things that they want to tax. My friend Tom Wheelwright says, if you want to change your tax, you've got to change your facts, right? You've got to change how you earn your income. As an investor, you can often pay zero taxes. If you're an employee, you could be paying, or a self-employed, the high earner, you can be paying up to 40, 60% taxes. I mean, it's crazy how much you can pay when you add in Social Security tax and other things as well. So I always, tell people it can sound too good to be true, but that's why it's really important. And I find even most CPAs, most people will go to their CPA and they say, oh no, it's the best you can do. But there's only I'd say there are tax strategy groups that do this, but there's only maybe 5% or less of CPAs that really understand how this stuff really works when it comes to investing in tax. And that's why we're putting this summit together later this year, is just to try to really help people to understand how to reduce taxes legally and how to get in touch with professionals or tax strategy people that can actually help them. Because even if I pay a fee for someone, if I pay a few $1,000s to help them create a strategy for me, but I can save 10 or 20 or 30 or $50,000, I mean, it's absolutely worth it, right? And then I learned, okay, this is actually possible, right?
At that point, it's another investment. It's just saving you money down the road.
Right, exactly.
So you did mention that you've spoken with a lot of high net worth investors individually. What are some of your takeaways, some commonalities that you found between all of these people that you've had conversations with?
So it was really a unique opportunity. These are people that were interested in investing in our deals or been interested over the years investing in our deals. And I just looked at it I had a chance to interview, 1,300 millionaires. I mean, the average net worth was 2 million. Some people were, 10 to 30 million or more. And, so it's just really great because, again, if you want to change the way you think, you've got to get around different people. There's this quote that says you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. And I think that applies just about every area of life, whether it comes to your finances or your health, or, just different, your social, your spirituality, all of that stuff. And so I think for me, there's a few things that really unite a lot of these groups. I was kind of amazed that people that are really wealthy were spending, a 30-minute Zoom call, just to kind of learn about what we do as far as investing. And I think that's really, something that most people that are wealthy and growing their wealth is they're learners, right? They're readers, they're learners, they network, they're trying to learn more because, wealth it's like a game, but the rules continually change, right? There's some rules that don't, but a lot of them, the situation, the circumstances change. So a lot of people are just really committed to education. And a lot of them are really committed to networking, going to events, meeting other people, talking with other operators and passive investors. And that's a huge, huge one. Another one, is that, time, a lot of these people have really understood that time is really, a lot of people say they want money freedom or financial freedom, but really what they want is time freedom, right? They want freedom of time. And to get freedom of time, you have to find ways to scale. And that's kind of goes to the point of what I was sharing earlier about, a lot of these people don't have 30 or 40 or 50 houses. I mean, there's the occasion, but that person that has that, usually that's their job. So they've gone from working as whatever they were doing before to now they just manage all these houses. And so, but for a lot of these people, they're really looking to develop good relationships with people that can help them grow their wealth. And so that's something that I've watched, and, it really comes down to, people being willing to commit to the process and learn. And I always tell people when you get started, a lot of people have just never invested. Everything is weird until you've done it, or you've known somebody who's done it. It just sounds like, I remember when I first heard syndication, I just was like, this is the weirdest thing ever. Like, what, syndication, is that I only heard of syndication twice, and it was like a crime syndicate kind of thing. Or there was like a syndicated TV show, right? Where it's like, oh, it goes everywhere. So I just didn't have a context for the word syndication. But, once people start investing, they put 50 or 100,000 in a deal, like me, they'll pay attention because they're invested. And typically the deal turns out just fine, but they learn. And then I've watched a lot of people that were mostly invested in stocks and bonds really shift to be like, oh, this thing actually works. I can actually do this, and I can actually grow my wealth and replace my income, leave my job, leave my business, and know I can have cash flow and grow, my wealth much more effectively than the stock market.
Yeah. Well said. Absolutely. Very well said. So one kind of final question as we're getting near the end here, something that I just was very intrigued by is you believe that saving money is foolish.
Yeah.
Please tell me why. Explain your thought process there, because I've been taught my entire life to save money.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was 8 years old, my grandmother took me to the local bank in Seattle, Washington, where I grew up, and basically opened a savings account for me, right? I put my $2 allowance a week in there, and it was, this was a virtue, right? Especially for my grandmother, who really grew up kind of Depression era. So, why do I say saving is not beneficial? Well, there's a saying, and it's a few people have kind of said this, but it's the context of, saving really is losing. And in the issue, in the context of high inflation, inflation officially is about 7% right now, or give or take. But it's unofficially, a site called Shadow Stats says it's actually above 15%. So if you look at actual costs of energy, actual costs of food, actual costs, it's actually more like 15% per year. So if I have 100K in the bank and I'm just sitting here waiting, which a lot of people are, a lot of people, the confused mind will just, I'm just going to wait till things kind of calm down, whatever. And so we're just putting it in the bank. But the challenge is that you're losing, if 100K is in the bank, you're losing 15,000 a year, right? Just by sitting in the bank. And over a 2-year period, if you annualize that, it's between 30 and 40% of your wealth, which is just crazy. So, and this is kind of a side note, Americans have actually a record amount of cash in savings accounts, about $5 trillion. Bloomberg came out with an article about a month ago saying this, and the highest it was ever before was around 1.2 trillion. So it's gone up 4 times what it was since, a lot of this was, different payments and stimulus and whatever, but the confused mind will say to wait. And I think it's really a mistake, because I think if you sit in cash, particularly in a time of high inflation, savers are losers. And it doesn't mean they're not people that don't have a bright future, right? They're losers, but they're losing money. And so I think, I'm about 95% invested. I do have a little bit of dry powder, but I really try to be invested in different deals, have money in places that, especially in areas where I can take advantage. I can basically use debt, wise debt, not credit card debt or things like that, but debt on good, income producing real estate. It pays me to hold it. And I pay off the debt in future dollars that are worth less, right? So that's how people take advantage of inflation, is that they find assets to get into, particularly if they can use, wise debt to get into it, and they can be paid to hold these assets, and it will grow over time.
So how can you use inflation to your advantage then?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I actually wrote an ebook about this on my website, bronsonequity.com. It's a 50-page ebook, and it's for free. Download it. basically kind of what I was sharing of, the primary ways, the biggest ways are buying things that are real assets that regardless, it's one thing I love about real estate. I like precious metals. I like other things is you can't just go and you can't just print more of them, right? It costs money and effort and resources to go get and to create these things, right? Even if it's gold and silver, which have a 5,000 year monetary history, you can't just snap your fingers and you've got more versus dollars. You can just, get the presses going. All of a sudden you've got more dollars. And I'm not convinced that particularly with politics that, since 1913, since the Federal Reserve was created, the dollar has lost 98% of its value. 98%. So it's not that I'm talking to my daughter who's 10 years old, and we were at a local burger place, and there's pictures of it when this place opened in Los Angeles and burgers were 10 cents and now they're $3. And I said, well, what happened? Is it that the dollars are, is the hamburger just cost more? And she's like, no, I've taught her this now. She said, no, it's just because there's more dollars out there, right? It's inflation. So she gets that. And I think that's something we all need to remember.
We all need to be more like your daughter.
She's pretty
Absolutely.
smart.
She could probably give me a run for my money, in all honesty. So you've already touched on this a couple times, but it's the final question I like to ask people on this show. And like I said, you've already kind of given your answer, but what does financial freedom mean to you?
Financial freedom really means freedom of time. A lot of people say they want financial freedom because they think when I have enough money, I'll be able to do the things I want. But really, when it comes down to it, when you have enough money, it gives you freedom of time to be able to choose how you want to live it. Do you want to travel? Do you want to spend time with family? Do you want to write that book? Do you want to, what are the things that you really find meaningful? And I think that, as Americans, we on the average American takes 13 days off a year. Well, if you go to, that's including sick time and whatever. And in Italy, it's 42 days, right? So it's it's multiples of that. And I just think there's something to that is to really, life is for living. It's not for, just simply working, especially doing a job we don't enjoy. They say about 65% of people don't enjoy their jobs. And I think that's really sad. And a lot of people, so I think no matter where, if somebody's listening, they don't enjoy their job, is to try to find a way, how do I start this year developing some passive income? And once you can get to where whatever your living expenses are, again, some people say I have to replace my income, but I'd say it's just your living expenses. And I got to 50 or 60K in passive income, and I realized I was free, right? That was my rat race number, right? If I could just get to where I replace my living expenses. And so I think that's a great kind of, road for someone to go down that really wants to become financially free.
Very well said. Yeah. If you don't have the time to spend the money that you're making, it's not really freedom, is it?
No, exactly.
So please tell the listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, so I have my website, bronsonequity.com. I mentioned that free ebook about how to use inflation to your advantage. People can check that out. We also have deals that we're doing. We've got many alternative assets that we're doing. We've got some new stuff that we're in the cooker now. So people join our investment club, they can hear about that. Also have a YouTube channel. We talk about a lot of things related to investing and financial freedom, also on social media as well. So this has been a lot of fun, Michael. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on. I learned a lot today. I know my listeners will as well. And it was wonderful to have you. So on behalf of myself, on behalf of Bronson, and on behalf of CamaPlan, self-directed IRA, please enjoy, and I will talk to you next week.